Welcome to the Real Estate Syndication Show. Whether you are a seasoned investor or building a new real estate business, this is the show for you. Whitney Sewell talks to top experts in the business. Our goal is to help you master real estate syndication. And now your host, Whitney Sewell.
This is your daily real estate syndication show. I'm your host, Whitney Sewell. Today, our guest is Ryan Smith. Thanks for being on the show, Ryan.
Thanks for having me.
Yeah, Ryan is a highly recruited athlete. He was drafted as a high school senior by the Baltimore Orioles and again in college by the Anthem Angels, but ultimately made the decision to pursue an entrepreneurial business career. He lives in Orlando with his wife, Jamie, and their 4 children. He serves as a principal of Elevation Capital Group, bringing more than 15 years of extensive business experience in market evaluation, property analysis, management systems, due diligence, and finance. Elevation, through its affiliates, has acquired properties worth more than $475 million and has interest in over 175 assets across more than 30 states. Ryan, thank you very much for your time today and being on the show and just bringing value to myself and the listeners as well. Tell them a little more about who you are, what you're up to right now, and let's dive in.
Yeah, so who I am, that's a complex one, but what we're focusing on, I will say, is we focus on mobile home parks and self-storage, generally buying existing assets that are not as efficient as they should be and adding value from the perspective of growing NOI, net operating income over time. Occasionally we'll build from the ground up, but that's more limited in the more recent past. But anyway, that's our focus.
Okay. So, you had mentioned it there, and we'd also talked about it before the show, just about how it all revolves around NOI. And I would love for us to dive into that a little bit and you elaborate on what that means exactly so the listeners can really understand the importance of that.
Sure. So I think there's a distinction between, first and foremost, cash flow, which a lot of your listeners may be coming from a form of revenue, a job. And so typically you leave that lily pad looking for a similar lily pad. So you say, okay, I've got to make X dollars to pay my bills. So I'm going to get into this thing called real estate and look to it to produce income, sufficient to also pay my bills. But what somebody may be overlooking is not just the value of the cash flow, which is valuable, but the value of that cash flow. And that's some people aren't clear on the distinction between those two things. And so our entire focus is the value of cash flow, and as a byproduct, cash flow. And so that value of cash flow evolves around NOI, net operating income, and the value that brings to our business and those who participate, both in the cash flow it produces, but more importantly, the value, the equity component or the wealth creation component of it. And so that defines everything we do. First and foremost, what type of assets we buy. So, over the last 20 years, the 2 best performing asset classes for same store NOI growth, as told through many public sources that, people can find, or if you want some of them, feel free to reach out. I'll send them to you. But in short, the 2 best have been self-storage is number 1 over the last roughly 20 years. Mobile home parks, manufactured housing is number 2, and then apartments is number 3. So if you really get the value of NOI and what it can do for you, to me, it makes sense to then participate and invest and grow a portfolio in that space. And so that's our focus.
Okay. So, I'd like for you to elaborate on this NOI thing and even more so of why it's so important. And it is, it is so important. But, and I liked how you also talked about, leaving one lily pad, looking for a similar one. And that's kind of where we're stuck at a lot of times when we're leaving a day job and jumping into this real estate game and we don't understand the importance, or the big picture, or the NOI and the importance of that cash flow. But can you elaborate on, why it all revolves around the NOI?
Sure. So first, I'll take it in pieces because it's kind of a value chain and so to speak. So first and foremost, there's a principle which you may or may not agree. Speaking to the listener, you may or may not agree, but I think you'll find it's very hard to earn yourself rich. The tax laws do not accommodate for you to grow wealthy through income generation and just pure savings and budgeting and those things. So to get wealthy to the extent that that's what you're trying to do, Not everybody that is that their goal, but if you want to create wealth, you have to do that through really equity or value creation, not income generation. So the reason why this is so important is then the second kind of principle is this. Let's assume you have an opportunity to buy a property at a 5 cap, a sustained 5 cap. So not a lofty valuation paying more than it's worth, but let's say a property today that'll be worth 5 cap or valued at 5 cap 10 years from now. And then let's say you're also able to buy a property today that will be 10 cap today and 10 cap in 10 years. So you have a 5 cap, you have a 10 cap. If you were purely going for cash flow, which one do you think you would prefer? Well, if you're going for cash flow, you'd probably go for the 10 cap asset because it stands to make more cash flow. Maybe you can borrow at 6%, maybe 6.5%, 7%, depending on the condition of the property. So you have a 10 cap, you're borrowing, let's say it's 7, so you have 3 points of spread. Okay, so you have a little bit more cash flow than maybe a 5 cap where you're borrowing at 3.5%. So you have 3 points of spread versus 1.5 points of spread. But what somebody's also missing, or could be missing maybe, is that at a 5 cap, $1 of NOI is worth 20 times that dollar. Okay, $1 divided by 0.05 is 20. Okay. At a 10 cap, $1 divided by 0.1 is 10. So for every dollar I can add to a property that's a sustained 5 cap is worth twice as much as every dollar you add at a sustained $10. Okay. So you have more cash flow, maybe, which is taxed as ordinary income. I have twice as much equity, which is not taxed based on today's tax code because it's not realized. Secondarily, from a risk standpoint, because I'm buying a 5 cap, or I'm saying 5, or as an example, the market may be more predictable, more stable. So I might have a more predictable path to NOI growth over a prolonged period of time. So my NOI growth trajectory may be a little bit more predictable, not guaranteed, but more predictable. And the value of my dollar, assuming all things equal, is twice as much, and I still have cash flow along the way. So that's why, number one, understanding the value, and I can go into more that 20-time multiple. Maybe we want to go into a little detail on that.
Yes,
but that's why if you're solely focusing on cash flow, it actually dictates your whole investment model, or tends to, and kind of gears you to going to lower quality assets, more turnaround heavy, more risk, worse markets. In the mobile home park space, you may be buying in tertiary or worse markets, a lot of park-owned homes, private utilities. So you're taking on heaps of risk for this one thing called cash flow, where there might be a better way to go about it in the long run. That's a mouthful.
No, that was really good. I would like for you to elaborate a little more, like you said, on or go back and go through that again a little bit, or explain a little more in detail.
Sure. So, and I think it's important to talk about everything in terms of the value of $1. And I say that because a lot of times, you listen to speakers and you listen to, there's a lot of content out there. There's a lot of noise and there's a lot of big numbers, and there's a race to the top in terms of hundreds of millions and billions, and it seems like a lot of hyperbole. But I'd run to the opposite way, run to the value of $1. Okay, because it's been said that big things have small beginnings. Okay, so go to the small beginning and start there. And then if the challenges over time don't change, don't lose focus. But in short, $1. So let's talk about the value of $1. So $1 of NOI, net operating income, per month. So let's say you buy a property and you increase, let's say all you do is raise the rents on a net basis $1 a month. Okay, 12 months a year, it's $12 a year. The value of that asset, assuming, let's say, a 10 cap. Okay, so divide that $12 a year annual NOI that you added to the property, the new NOI, divide it by 0.1 or 10%. Okay, and that has a multiplying effect of you now have $120 of value. So if you buy a property, you add $1 a month of NOI, that's worth $120 in value. Okay, now I say this, and I'll make one point of connection. When I was growing up in this industry and learning a lot, and I'm sure you and others have had the same experience, you meet people and you say this, I work so much harder than them, yet they have a result 20 times what I have. What do they know that I don't? Right? I think we've all had that. They know something that I don't know, or they're just that much better. In most cases, what I have found is they know the value of the dollar. They don't value simply cash flow. And that's been the distinction. So why do I say all of that? Okay, so going then back to this example, let's say that $1 a month, let's say you buy a property, that's a 5 cap, sustained 5 cap, good market, all of that, and you think it'll be a 5 cap for the long run. Okay, in that case, you have $1 a month, 12 a year, divided by 0.05. So you have $240 of value. Okay. So now the question I would pose to you, and you can pose it to your kids. How many of your kids would go into a Walmart and not leave that parking lot until they found $1? Well, some would, some wouldn't. Sounds like a lot of work, kind of sweaty mess, the whole deal. But if that dollar was worth $240, if you gave each one of your kids $240 for every dollar they found in that parking lot, you'd need more jars, right? Because
that's right.
Well, and we're it's been said, adults are kids with wrinkles. We're not much different. Okay, if you look at a dollar like just a dollar, but if you look at a dollar at $240, that's pretty, for me, that's compelling. So our whole daily focus every day is very simple. Every time we visit a property, every time we buy a property, it's all about buying a property and managing in a way where we add as many of those $1 a month as possible, because every one we find is $240 in value, and that's imperative. Pretty simple. So what does this all mean? So let me make one more point here, and then we can go back, and it's a pretty interesting. Start with the end in mind and work back. So going back to the concept that we meet people and they must know something that we don't know, right? So if you buy a property and you add $1 a month of net operating income, some people would say, well, great, I have $12 a year of cash flow. And you may have taxes. Let's say you pay ordinary income, and let's say 40% of that goes to tax or whatever. Let's not go into the whole depreciation and cost seg discussion, but anyway, and in that case, you may have $6, $7 of net, after tax cash. While the person who understands the value of that dollar has $240 plus the $7 of cash flow. They have a huge result, not just the cash flow. So then, starting with this concept, you can start with the end in mind and work backwards. Okay, so let's do that really quickly. So let's say one of your listeners, let's say they have a goal of $10 million of net worth. Okay, and I'm just picking a number out of thin air. It may be, your goal may be higher, it may be lower. You may not believe in having net worth goals. So anyway, but let's say it's 10 million. So if your goal is to create $10 million of net worth at a 5 cap, you need 500,000 of NOI, of net operating income. If you create $500,000 of NOI at a 5 cap, you have $10 million net worth. That seems daunting, right? 500,000, huge number, hard to wrap your mind around. Okay, so let's divide that into monthly increments. So 500,000 divided by 12. Okay, you want to just round it out, say 40,000, just roughly, just say 40,000 a month. So you need $40,000 roughly a month of NOI, and you have a $10 million net worth. Okay, still daunting. So let's keep going. Okay, let's say your goal is 1,000 units. Let's say your goal is to own 1,000 units. So what's 40,000 divided by 1,000? I believe that's $40. Is that right? So let's say it's $40. So, and I believe it is. So $40 a month. So now you need $40 a month of NOI. So you need to buy 1,000 units and add $40 a month over any period of time, 5 years, 10 years, and you have a $10 million net worth. Okay, now let's put time on it. Okay, let's add data to the discussion. So let's take the $40 and let's say it's your goal to do this in 5 years. So what's $40 divided by 5? $8 a month. So you need to buy $1,000 units and increase the NOI by $8 a month per year for 5 years. And if you do that, you've created $10 million of net worth. Okay, so this afternoon, the value of for less than the value of your lunch that you'll spend at Starbucks or wherever you're going to go eat lunch, probably spend 10, 12, $15 on lunch. If you bought 1,000 units and only added $8 of NOI, found a way to either rent more units, add other sources of income, cut expenses, that amounts to $8 per year for 5 years straight, you've created $10 million in net worth for yourself. And what if it takes you 7 years?
Yeah,
Right?
or 10 years.
Yeah. The point in it is it's the value of the dollar cannot be underestimated. Shouldn't be, I'll say. I see it underestimated often. I don't think it should be.
Yeah, or just the $5 you have in your wallet, right?
Right.
Yeah,
Right.
that's right.
If only that had a value component, then I'd be happy.
Right. Yeah. So, I love how you broke that down. You really started at a high level where most people would think, oh, wait a minute, that's not achievable, and almost sign it off, right? Like, I don't even talk to me about that. But then just really bringing it down to, a manageable way almost to achieve it, to actually see a way to get there. I love that. And so, tell me though about, getting to that 1,000 units or getting to that, your mobile home park, self-storage, that's been your asset class, your avenue to getting to this. I don't know if that's your goal or not, the $10 million net worth or a certain amount of time, but I'd love to know just some actionable steps too, to help the listener to see that 1,000 units as achievable.
Yeah, I would, I wouldn't predetermine. This is me, my personality. I'm not much of a, put 10,000 units on the board. Although now we own and or operate more than 10,000 units. But I see people who advertise the total number of units. To me, that's fine. It's not good or bad. That's somebody's goal for themselves. To me, my goal is to be the best I can be every day. And if that means I acquire more units, terrific. If that means I focus solely on the units I have for the pursuit of the dollar, that's great. But with regard to your question of more of a starting point, like I said a minute ago, I think big things have small beginnings. So sometimes people feel compelled to get to a big goal and they skip over the small details and the most important details of what am I building, what foundation am I laying for the house that I'm building. They're going to the design of the roof and they haven't even dealt with the foundation yet. So to me, that's why this NOI concept for me is foundational. It then dictates what asset class I pursue, how I manage. So if the dollar is really as valuable as I've kind of posited here, should I be in the field walking the properties regularly, or should I manage from an office? Right. If I can find a dollar that's worth 240, I need, my feet need to be in the field. I need to be looking at property, finding ways every time I visit a property that we can add value. So to me, the simple beginning of what the business is built on then dictates how then you should, live and everything else. Not helpful at all to somebody who's just starting, because everybody wants specifics like do this, do that. But I would get really clear with what you're going for. Like if you're starting by saying, okay, I get the value of NOI, I want to create NOI over time. Then from there, all the follow-on questions and answers come. Okay, well, what asset class do you want to pursue? Well, look at historically maybe the best, in terms of what has produced NOI growth over time, what's projected by experts, and what do you think might be the best going forward, the most resilient, cycle resilient, all of these things. And then from there, putting together an operating model that really takes the properties from where they are to where they need to be from an NOI perspective. And then if you have 200 units or 500 units, going back to the example a second ago, that was 1,000. But if you were able to add $16 a month of NOI for 5 years, well, now you only need 500 units to do the same outcome. That's why the units don't really matter. It just depends on, you could do more than you ever dreamed in life with 200 units if you do it well. Just depends. Some it may take 5,000 units if you do it, not well. Depends.
So, finding ways to add these dollars to your properties, or, what are you doing? You even mentioned like sitting in the office versus actually going out there and looking for ways to increase your NOI. And what are some ways you've done that?
Yeah, so every property is different. There's the general theme of what we're doing, which is NOI, ideally growing it. Then there's kind of the sub themes, which is we're pushing rents to market, we're adding other revenue streams to property, which I'll give you a couple examples, and then cutting expenses. So just I guess to pick a property to give you an example, we bought a property about 9 months ago in Katy, Texas, and by me, I mean one of the funds that I'm a manager of called Fund 7. So we bought this property about 9 months ago in Katy, Texas, which is a suburb of Houston. Very simply, it's a 3-story storage facility. They had an occupancy issue that we identified was due to the way the building was constructed. So they had this novel idea that didn't work, where they put these giant fans on the second and third floor to blow air. The thought was if you blow air fast enough to the second and third floor, it'll somehow equal cold or cool or climatized. Where in Houston, you're just blowing hot air in at a high rate of speed, just makes it really fast moving hot air. So didn't work that well, and the fans were really noisy. So they had a really tough time leasing the second and third floor. So we bought the property, put in new management, did what we normally do, but we climatized the second floor, climatized the third floor. We've owned that property for about 9 months, and when we bought it, it was roughly 60% occupied. Now it's over 80% occupied. And so when you look at that, you say, okay, 500 units, 20% occupancy, that's 100 new units of absorption. What is the NOI? Well, it's higher. So that's an example. Now on mobile home parks, a little bit different. So we regularly actually take a mobile home park and add storage to it, a storage solution to it, kind of an independent storage where we put in kind of a traditional storage solution in it as another line item of revenue, and that wasn't there before. And then what we do to create demand for storage is we manage the properties well, in that we don't allow for junk to stay in the yard. What makes a mobile home park look like a trailer park is typically, there's a long list, but one of the things is stuff that should be on the inside, left on the outside: couches, chairs, just stuff that where the grass grows around it. It looks horrible. I wouldn't want to live in a community like that, and we don't want our residents to have to tolerate that. So we have a very strict policy, over that, and so the stuff has to go somewhere, and we fine if it doesn't and all that. But the point is that we give you a place for that stuff to go. So we manage well, we make you move the stuff, and then we give you a place to put it if you want to keep it. If you want to keep it on your property, we'll also bring in a tough shed, covered parking, whatever it is, and most of the residents can't afford for that hit, that cost. So what we'll do as the park is we'll go buy a tough shed, put it in, or something similar, and let's say it costs $3,000. We, the park, will buy it. We'll put the shed on your property, and then we charge you what amounts to $30 a month. 1% of the cost is added to your lot rent. So number one, the quality of the park goes up because the stuff goes bye-bye. And whether it's through independent storage or on-site storage, it also creates a line item of revenue to the extent that the resident wants to use our capital instead of theirs. And that's one. There's many other examples, but that's one.
That's awesome. Wow. Unfortunately, we just got a few minutes left, but this has been great. I've really enjoyed this, Ryan. But a few questions though, what's been the hardest part of this syndication journey for you?
There's just been a lot of I can't single out a hardest one. It's just there's headwinds and tailwinds, and you kind of learn as you go. So we're on our 7th fund. About probably next year we'll start our 8th fund, and every fund is not distinctly, but moderately different than the preceding one, because you learn something. There's just life lessons on every fund, and structural changes, regulatory. There's just a lot of things you learn.
And how are you preparing for this potential downturn that everybody's talking about?
It's a good question. So we try to manage and mitigate our risks. So number one, we're in spaces that are referred to as cycle resilient or low beta from a market correlation standpoint. Both storage and mobile home parks have historically been lower beta asset classes, meaning they're not as tied to the overall market. if the market were to fall out tomorrow, affordable housing would still be in demand. So we like that aspect. So we number one, the asset classes we buy almost speak to that in a way. But then internal to the way we buy, we want to buy in primary, secondary markets. We want to buy really nice properties in really good markets, and be one of the leaders in the market rather than a laggard. Because if there's ever a softening in demand, we think we'll have the product everybody wants, and we want to manage it that way. Then from a financing standpoint, I'm only tree topping these, but from a financing standpoint, today you can go high leverage. You can in some cases go 80% leverage. We think that's too high. So we moderately use debt. We typically obtain 50 to 60% in terms of leverage. And a lot of a lot of people who are buying real estate, they almost start backwards in that they say, well, the higher the LTV I can go, the less money I have to raise. But we think we start with what do we think is the best model, and then we raise the capital we need to do the best model that we think is best. So anyway, we use low leverage, and then we keep our expenses lean. So we're already there now, and that wasn't in response to what we think might happen. That's the way we operate, in the last couple of years. And anyway,
nice.
We think we're well positioned.
What's a way that you've recently improved your business that we could apply to ours?
I would say over time, just the management approach of flattening our property management structure. Historically, we utilized a process at one point that became pretty inefficient, which was where you have the on-site managers reporting to a district manager, reporting to a regional manager. You have this kind of militaristic structure that gets pretty bogged down in terms of people talking to people. So information wasn't flowing that efficiently. And so what we kind of pivoted to was a flatter structure, so that like presently we have 4 VPs, and all VPs are responsible for all properties, both mobile home parks, both storage, all regions. And so each property is seen and walked usually 3 to 4 times per year by a combination of those VPs, so that Jeff, who's one of our VPs, is very different than Sandy. And so both properties are managed ultimately by Jeff and Sandy. They manage the managers, and then the other 2 VPs cycle through. Then in addition to that, Jamie, myself, and Brian physically walk the properties twice a year. So it's a much flatter organizational structure. We do use technology, I can pull real-time reports right now, so we can see where things are. But I think a flatter organizational structure was a huge improvement from a cost standpoint and performance.
I like that. And I think most people would kind of lean more towards the military structure like you talked about at first. But after you talk about it like that, I can see how information up to you is going to be difficult to achieve, right?
Yep.
Or it's going to change numerous times potentially by the time it gets there. So I like that. And just having the different perspectives too of different VPs actually being on the ground. Different people are going to see different things, or it's going to be important to them.
Exactly.
So, great idea. So what's your best advice for caring for investors?
For caring for investors?
So they want to come back to the next deal.
Set reasonable expectations and then perform. I think I know that's overly simple, but if an investor asks us, what question, the typical question, what question did I not ask that I should have asked? You get that all the time, and it's, well, I don't think you spend enough time on risks. And by the way, we have Section 8 of our PPM that goes through a ton of risks, and at the end says this is not all the risks, right? So I don't think you spend enough time on the risks associated with the investment, and so that's not the easy path, right? But it's the right path. And then as you're talking about the business, kind of understating expectations and making it really conservative and achievable. And then, when we go out and we hit those expectations, people will say, well, I have several emails that say you've done everything you said you would do. Well, that's the goal. So.
Great answer. Oh, that's good. And what would you say is the number one thing that's contributed to your success?
Taking, when you get a mile down a road, there's always several miles, but that was, one step further than one step short of a mile, so you just keep taking the next step. And You have the kind of the corny cliche things where believe in yourself and have vision and all of those things. But I would say, the part you can't teach is perseverance and a high pain tolerance. The high pain tolerance most people don't have. They have a vision and they have self-belief until it gets painful, and then they divert, so that's the, and don't let me lead you believe it's been highly painful, but you have times in a business where you're like, wow, I didn't see that coming, or you get surprised and what you envisioned as the outcome wasn't the outcome, those kind of things. So, yeah.
Is it Mike Tyson that says everybody has a plan until they get punched in the face?
Yeah, exactly. Things like that. So I think having a high pain tolerance and knowing why you're doing it. I mean, obviously they, have a reason beyond yourself, which, gets into belief and maybe faith, and depending on the person. But anyway, I would say all of those things.
And before we have to go, tell us how you like to give back.
Oh, to me, and I'll just really quickly, I guess, to me, it's, if you like to give back, I'll say, then everything you do should be geared to a degree on that. There shouldn't be a part of, this is just me, there shouldn't be a part of your life where you say, okay, this is where I don't give back, and here's where I do give back as a mea culpa for the times that I didn't. Anyway, I think if life is stewardship, then the way you earn should be, should be giving to others as much as the way you give. So, my wife and I have we formed giving circles, giving groups. We have a number of them in Orlando that we're involved in, and there's more that we're not involved in, which we love. And if anybody wants to do this, reach out. We have a blueprint. We'll help you with it. But it's 12 people, couples, singles, men, women, however you want to do it. But we have one, for example, it's $2,500 a year. There's 12 people. So that's $30,000 a year. You meet twice a year as a group to get together and decide who in your community to give the gift to. It could be $30,000. It could be two $15,000 gifts. But what I realized many years ago when we did our first one is, man, we really don't know a lot of people that are in that great a need. And that was condemning in a way, because we needed to expand our social fabric. There wasn't a lot of vulnerability within our sphere of friends. And so that to me is probably the biggest gift we can all give another, is to give up when you become financially successful to a degree, you have less vulnerability, more control. So to a degree, if we can give up some of that control, take on somebody else's vulnerability, I think, and transfer that, I think that's a huge gift. So anyway, within those giving circles, it's been life-giving to Jamie and I.
That's awesome. I appreciate you sharing that. That's incredible. I hope it's inspiring to a lot of the listeners as well. Even you're talking about how it helped you to see your sphere of influence, either the people around you, or how you need to maybe interact with some other people that are in need, and you can help. And so that's awesome. Appreciate you sharing that very much. And tell the listeners though how they can get in touch with you and learn more about you.
Oh, I think most people are running away by now. They're like, this guy's nuts. But if you do, I'd love to help you any way I can. So my direct line, 407-602-7662. My email is ryan@elevationcg.com. Happy to help.
Thank you for listening to the Real Estate Syndication Show, brought to you by LifeBridge Capital. LifeBridge Capital works with investors nationwide to invest in real estate, while also donating 50% of its profits to assist parents who are committing to adoption. LifeBridge Capital, making a difference, one investor and one child at a time. Connect online at www.lifebridgecapital.com for free material and videos to further your success.